The reason you're struggling to be vulnerable isn't because you lack courage. It's because you've been taught and trained from very early on to view every act of emotional honesty as a form of surrender. In our world, I think we are taught that life is really a series of zero-sum games where someone's always up and someone's always down. And so we apply this competitive logic to our boardrooms, to our ball fields, and even eventually to our bedrooms. We have, in some sense, internalized a definition of winning that requires us to maintain a position of constant advantage. And in that framework, showing your fear, showing your doubts, showing your need for help feels like a real tactical disaster. So you treat your heart like a military secret that must be protected at all costs. But you're failing to realize that by winning the battle for control, you're really losing the entire war for connection. And so you've stayed safe, but you've also stayed fundamentally untouched and alone. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here for this conversation today because we're going to be spending some time in the trenches of the male ego. So this is Uber Bintegers, a space for the radical alignment of our human soul. So everything we discuss here is anchored by two pillars that I believe are the only metrics for a successful life. The first one is integrity. Integrity is the internal discipline of self-honesty where your outside and your inside match perfectly. And then the second pillar is intimacy. Intimacy is it's a courageous act of being truly known by another person. And so today we're looking at how our fear of losing makes both integrity and intimacy quite impossible. We're going to dismantle the idea that vulnerability is a weakness and see it for what it actually is. And I would say a vulnerability is the ultimate power move. But we have a massive problem with the way that we define strength. See, for most of us, strength is synonymous with containment, right? We think the strongest man in the room is the one who can actually take the most hits without flinching, the one who can actually process his pain in silence, and the one who never lets his guard down long enough for anyone to see his soft spots. And so we've turned ourselves into these emotional fortresses. We believe that if we can just stay impenetrable, then we'll be respected. And so we think that vulnerability is something you do only when you have no other choice. A last resort of surrender when your defenses have finally been overwhelmed or overrun. See, this mindset creates a constant low-level state of internal war that destroys our integrity. Integrity requires us to be undivided. But the man who views vulnerability as losing is perpetually split, isn't he? He's feeling one thing on the inside, and that's perhaps like this deep sense of inadequacy, a fear of failure perhaps, or this desperate need for reassurance. But he's projecting something entirely different on the outside, isn't he? He's pretending that to be certain is the only thing when really he's confused, or he's pretending to be okay when he's really hurting. And it's this misalignment that's a form of self-betrayal. You are in essence lying to yourself and to the people who love you and the ones you love about the reality of your experience. And you're performing this version of strength that is really built on a foundation of dishonesty. And the weight of this lie is most likely what's making you feel so exhausted. I mean, think about the sheer cognitive load of treating every conversation like a negotiation, right? When you view vulnerability as a loss, you're constantly calculating. You're asking yourself, if I tell him or her that I'm stressed about work, will they lose respect for me? See, if I admit that I don't know the answer, will I lose my authority? If I'm going to show the places where I'm hurt, am I going to give them a weapon that they can use against me later? And so you're living in this state of perpetual defense, right? You aren't actually listening to the people in your life. You're actually just more so scanning their words for potential threats. And you're so busy trying not to lose that you've ultimately forgotten how to just simply be, like how to be present in that moment. And this is not living. This is a high stakes chess match that you're playing against the people that you're supposed to love most and be open to. Now this dynamic is also, it's like the death of intimacy. Intimacy, by its very definition, requires a loss of defense, doesn't it? You can't be known if you are behind a shield. And when you refuse to be vulnerable, you're telling your partner that you do not trust them with your humanity. You're signaling that you believe they are an adversary who will at the first opportunity exploit your weakness rather than be a teammate who will support you through your challenges. And this creates this culture of distance in our relationships. We wonder why our marriages, for example, feel like these business arrangements, or why our friendships feel so surface level in the ways that we hang out, right? And the reason is that no one is actually being willing to lose in these contexts. No one has been willing to put down their armor first. So we're all waiting for the other person to drop their shield so that we can keep ours up, and as a result, no one ever gets close enough to feel the heat. See, we have to understand that the win that we're chasing, especially through our defensiveness, is really a hollow experience. Suppose you successfully hide your fear, and maybe you maintain your image of invulnerability. Okay, let's just say you successfully do this. Well, what have you actually won, though? I mean, you've won maybe the right to be respected for someone who you truly aren't, right? You've won the right to be admired for the performance that you're giving that is far from who you truly are. But you've also lost the chance to be loved for who you genuinely are, like for what your soul is. Real love is not an award for a perfect performance. Real love is a response to an honest revelation. And when you choose not losing over being known, you're choosing a trophy over your heart being touched in a wonderful way. You're winning the argument, yes, but you're also losing that connection in that relationship. Now, this competitive mindset is why I think we're so prone to that compulsion to be right in every conflict. And in a zero-sum world, being wrong often feels like humiliation. It feels like we've given up ground. So we fight for our opinions as if we're almost fighting for our lives. And we use our logic as this blunt instrument to hammer the other person into submission, right? We want to see that look on their face where they finally admit that we were right. But in that moment of victory, we've actually created a profound defeat. We've humiliated the person that we love, and we've also pushed them away to protect our own ego. And we've won the point, but we've also damaged the bond. This is the definition, I would say, of a hollow victory, a win that is so costly that it might very well be a loss. And then there's the aftermath of these wins, right? That heavy, lingering bitterness that sits in that room long after the shouting perhaps has stopped. And we call it maybe needing space, right? But in actuality, this is the emotional wreckage of our refusal to be vulnerable. We feel sick, we feel disconnected, we feel a deep sense of shame that we try to cover with more sovereignty, right? This is the lingering pain that usually comes in the aftermath, and it's a signal that our integrity has been breached. We know deep down that we weren't actually being our best selves. We know that we were being defensive rather than being honest. But because we still view vulnerability as losing, we don't really know how to bridge this gap. We don't know how to say, listen, I was scared and I acted like a jerk in my bid to try and hide this. Here, to reclaim our integrity back, we have to realize that vulnerability is the only path to true power, to real power. True power is not the ability to dominate. True power is really the ability to stay present in that moment. It's the strength to say, this is who I am and this is what I'm feeling, and I'm not going to hide it even if this makes me feel exposed. See, this is the restoration of our presence. When we stop trying to not lose, we find this level of groundedness that no armor could ever provide. We are now no longer at the mercy of the wind. We are now anchored in our own truth, and our truth really is unshakable. This is the only kind of strength, I would argue, that actually matters. Now, this shift also requires us to change our internal vocabulary, doesn't it? We have to stop calling emotional honesty weakness, and instead we have to start calling it intellectual and emotional precision. See, being vulnerable is just being accurate about your internal reality. So if you're feeling small, saying I feel small is not a loss. It's an actual act of radical accuracy. It's the move from being a liar to being a truth teller. And when you're accurate about your soul, you are in a state of alignment. You're no longer wasting energy on the performance, which means that now you have energy for true connection. And this is what I would say is like the secret weapon of being a man in his wholeness. Now, in our relationships, we have to start practicing what I would call intellectual I want to call this intentional surrender. Yeah, that's intentional surrender. This is not about really giving up your values or letting yourself be walked all over. It's about being the first one to drop the defense. And it's about being courageous and brave enough to lead with your soft spots. So in the middle of a conflict, for example, instead of reaching for a comeback, this is where you want to reach for a confession. And you want to say something like, listen, I'm noticing that I'm trying really hard to win this argument right now because I'm feeling really criticized. And it's making me feel like I'm failing you especially. Can we just maybe stop for a second so I can catch a beat? Do you mind if we just come back to this in 5, 10, half an hour? See, the moment that is like, it might seem like a loss for your ego, but this is a massive win for the relationship. It changes the frequency of the room instantaneously. It moves the dynamic from a battlefield to a sanctuary. And it's now that you're proving that the relationship is far more important to you than your need to be unbeatable, right? You're showing your partner or your friend or your family member, your coworker, that you trust them enough to be reachable. And this is where real intimacy is born. It's built in these moments where we're brave enough to let the other person see who we are without us having to reach for our weapons. And this is also how we can heal the frustration of being misread and also misunderstood. So if you want people to read you correctly, you have to provide the right text, right? You have to be willing to share the subtitles of your internal life. So instead of just showing the anger that you might be feeling, you also want to show the hurt beneath the anger. So instead of showing them just the withdrawal, you also want to show them the fear that's caused that withdrawal. And when you're courageous enough to show the why behind the what, you're now giving these people information that they need to love and care for you well. And it's here that you stop being a puzzle, and now you start being a person who can actually be known in a much better way. Now, we also have to realize that the fear of losing through vulnerability is really a cultural, it's like a cultural inheritance that no longer really serves us anymore. I mean, it may have helped our ancestors survive maybe in a world of physical threats, but I would argue it's actually killing us in a world of relational needs. So in a modern marriage, for example, or even a modern brotherhood, the armor is an obstacle, not a defense, right? The strongest men are the ones who have the courage to be porous, the ones who can actually let the world in and let the truth out. These are the men who actually change things. These are the men who build bridges that don't really wash away from the first storm, right? Now, the cost of avoiding vulnerability is a life of having no impact because of the isolation. You see, you can spend your whole life being that guy who never loses, the guy who is always strong, and the guy who always seems to be under control, right? And I mean, you're gonna die with a very impressive, very polished, but also very empty life, right? You will have missed entirely the point of being a human being, which is, in essence, I think, to be affected by other human beings. You'll have stayed sovereign, but you'll also have never been seen. You'll be isolated and alone. So I want to challenge you, my dear listener, today to find maybe one moment where you can maybe lose your defense. I want you to find one conversation where you feel that urge to be unshakable, and then instead in that moment, I want you to be porous, right? I want you to maybe share a doubt that you've been struggling with, or a fear that you've been carrying, or a need that you've been hiding. Now, don't do it because you have to do it. Do it because you want to be real, right? Now, notice the reaction of your own body when you do this, right? You might feel this surge of adrenaline at the very first instance. It's like the alarm of your ego telling you that you're in danger, right? But if you choose to stay in that space, you'll likely also feel something else. You'll perhaps feel this profound sense of relief. You'll feel like the weight of the mask is finally lifting. And then you'll finally feel the click of alignment as your internal reality finally meets the external world. You will realize at this point that losing your armor is most likely the only way to find your life. Now, this is the work that I am committed to here with Uber Bintegers. We are moving past the competitive performance of masculinity and into this collaborative reality of shared humanity, right? We're building a community of men, especially men, who are brave enough, courageous enough to be reachable. And so we're choosing the loss of our ego for the gain of our soul. We're choosing intimacy over dominance. So you're not a soldier on the battlefield. I think you're a man who is engaged in real life. And you don't have to win every infraction to experience your value. You just have to show up. You have to, you have to be more accessible and to be moved by those around you. And listen, you have the right to be known for exactly who you are, warts, cracks, and all. Now, as we're moving forward into our next episode, we're going to look at the misrepresentation wound is one way of saying it. I'll choose a better title for that tomorrow. But we're going to look at the unique pain of being fundamentally misread by the people who matter most, and how we can navigate the frustration of having our intentions distorted, right? We're going to further explore how we can heal that deep-seated feeling of being unseen, and then find the path back to what accurate and true connection looks like. But for now, I want you to sit with your own defenses today. Find some time in a few moments today. And then notice where you're fighting when you should be feeling. Notice where you're pursuing winning at the expense of knowing what's going on here. And then I want you to imagine what would happen if you just drop that shield. Let me remind you, you're whole. You're a whole human being. You're beautifully human. And you're still here in this moment, being present. And you have the right to be felt. You have the right to be reachable. And you have the right to be known. I hope you'll experience and feel that. I'll see you in tomorrow's episode. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.